Royals, despite the authority they possess, do get sick. Some of these diseases suffered by them are more bizarre and gruesome than those of ordinary people. From smelly, gangrene in the privates to the mysterious neurological disorder that made a king seem dead. Welcome to History Mystery. Today we are looking at strange and gruesome diseases suffered by royals. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of our latest videos. King Herod's gangrene. King Herod was the ruler of Judea from 37 to 4 BCE, and he is best known for his role in the biblical story of the massacre of the innocents, when he ordered the killing of all male infants in Bethlehem to prevent the rise of a rival king. But Herod's cruelty was not limited to his subjects. He also executed several members of his own family, including his wife and 3 of his sons. Herod's paranoia and brutality may have been influenced by his chronic kidney disease, which caused him depression and irritability. But his final years were plagued by a new affliction, Fournier's gangrene, a form of gangrene that affects the genitals and perineum. According to the ancient historian Flavius Josephus, Herod had a terrible craving to scratch himself. His bowels were ulcerated, and his privates gangrenous and wormy. Herod's discomfort was so extreme that he even tried to kill himself with a knife, but was stopped by his cousin. He died shortly after, in agony and hated by his people. Piero the Gouty. Piero de' Medici was the ruler of Florence from 1464 to 1469, and he was the son of the famous Cosimo de' Medici, the founder of the Medici dynasty. Piero inherited his father's wealth and power, but also his gout, a painful condition that causes inflammation and swelling of the joints. Gout is often associated with a rich diet, something that Piero enjoyed as a member of the elite. Piero suffered from gout since childhood, and it affected his mobility and appearance. He was nicknamed Illinois Gottoso, which means the gouty in Italian. Piero's gout also limited his political influence, as he was unable to travel or attend important meetings. He died at the age of 53, after a severe attack of gout that left him bedridden for months. Charles II of Spain's inbreeding. Charles II was the last Habsburg king of Spain, and he ruled from 1665 to 1700. He was also the product of generations of inbreeding, as his parents were uncle and niece, and his grandparents were first cousins. As a result, Charles suffered from numerous physical and mental defects, such as a large head, a protruding jaw, a tongue that was too big for his mouth, a weak immune system, epilepsy, and infertility. He was also mentally impaired, and could barely read or write. He was known as El Hechizado, which means the bewitched in Spanish, because many people believed that he was cursed by evil spirits. Charles' poor health and inability to produce an heir led to the War of the Spanish Succession, a conflict that involved several European powers and lasted for 13 years. Charles died at the age of 38, after a series of illnesses that included fever, vomiting, diarrhea, and convulsions. His autopsy revealed that his body was full of abnormalities, such as a shrunken heart, a blackened lung, and an enlarged spleen. His inbreeding coefficient was estimated to be 0.254, which means that he was more inbred than if his parents were siblings. King Tutankhamun's deformities. King Tutankhamun was the pharaoh of Egypt from 1332 to 1323 BCE, and he is famous for his intact tomb that was discovered in 1922. Tutankhamun was the son of Akhenaten, the pharaoh who introduced a radical form of monotheism to Egypt, and his sister, whose name is unknown. Tutankhamun's parents were also the children of Amenhotep III and his sister, Tai. This rampant multi-generational inbreeding eventually produced the deformed skulls that ancient Egyptian royalty is known for. Tutankhamun had a misshapen skull, a cleft palate, club feet, missing bones, and scoliosis. He also suffered from malaria and a bone infection that may have contributed to his death at the age of 19. King Henry VIII's leg ulcer. King Henry VIII was the King of England from 1509 to 1547, and he is notorious for his 6 marriages and his role in the English Reformation. Henry was also a very active and athletic man, who enjoyed hunting, jousting, and dancing. However, his lifestyle took a toll on his health, especially after a jousting accident in 1536 that injured his leg. The wound became infected and developed into a chronic ulcer that never healed. The ulcer caused Henry excruciating pain and emitted a foul odor that repulsed everyone around him. It also affected his mood and behavior, making him more irritable and tyrannical. Henry's leg ulcer was one of the factors that led to his obesity, as he became less able to exercise and more dependent on food for comfort. He died at the age of 55, after a series of strokes and heart attacks. His leg ulcer was so large that it burst open during his embalming, and his body had to be covered with wax and spices to mask the smell. King George III's madness. King George III was the King of Great Britain and Ireland from 1760 to 1820, and he is best known for losing the American colonies in the Revolutionary War. He was also the first British monarch to be diagnosed with a mental illness, which caused him to have episodes of delirium, paranoia, and violence. His condition was initially attributed to porphyria, a rare genetic disorder that affects the production of heme, a component of blood. Porphyria can cause symptoms such as abdominal pain, skin sensitivity, and mental disturbances. However, recent studies have suggested that George may have suffered from bipolar disorder, a mood disorder that causes alternating periods of depression and mania. George's mental illness worsened over time, and he spent the last decade of his life in complete isolation, blind, deaf, and insane. He died at the age of 81, after a long and turbulent reign. Queen Mary I Phantom Pregnancy. Queen Mary I was the Queen of England and Ireland from 1553 to 1558, and she is infamous for her persecution of Protestants, which earned her the nickname Bloody Mary. Mary was also the first woman to rule England in her own right, and she was determined to secure her succession by producing a Catholic heir. She married Philip II of Spain, the son of her cousin, Charles V, in 1554, and soon announced that she was pregnant. However, her pregnancy turned out to be a false alarm, as she never gave birth to a child. Mary's phantom pregnancy may have been caused by a hormonal imbalance, a uterine tumor, or a psychological delusion. It was a huge embarrassment for Mary and her husband, and a disappointment for her supporters. Mary had another phantom pregnancy in 1557, and died the following year, childless and depressed. King Edward II's red-hot poker. King Edward II was the King of England from 1307 to 1327, and he is notorious for his incompetence, his favoritism, and his homosexuality. Edward was married to Isabella of France, the daughter of Philip IV, but he had a series of male lovers, such as Piers Gaveston and Hugh Despenser. His neglect of his wife and his kingdom led to a rebellion led by Isabella and her lover, Roger Mortimer, in 1326. They captured Edward and forced him to abdicate in favor of his son, Edward III. Edward was imprisoned in Berkeley Castle, where he was allegedly murdered in 1327. According to a popular legend, Edward's killers inserted a red-hot poker into his anus, burning his internal organs and killing him without leaving any visible marks on his body. The legend was probably invented by Edward's enemies to tarnish his reputation and justify his deposition. However, some historians have argued that the legend may have some truth to it, as it was a common method of execution for homosexuals in medieval Europe. King Alexander III's cliff fall. King Alexander III was the King of Scotland from 1249 to 1286, and he is regarded as one of the most successful Scottish monarchs. He expanded his kingdom, maintained peace with England, and fostered a prosperous and stable society. However, his personal life was marred by tragedy, as he lost his wife and his 3 children in a span of 8 years. In 1286, Alexander decided to remarry, and he chose Yolande of Droz, a French princess, as his bride. He married her in November, and then left for Edinburgh to attend a council meeting. On his way back, he decided to take a shortcut across the Firth of Forth, despite the stormy weather and the darkness of the night. He was accompanied by a small group of guards, but he soon outran them with his horse. He never reached his destination, as he fell off a cliff and broke his neck. His body was found the next day, with his horse lying dead beside him. His death was a shock to the whole nation, and it plunged Scotland into a succession crisis that led to the Wars of Scottish Independence. King Charles II of France's death-like state. King Charles II was the King of France from 843 to 877, and he was the grandson of Charlemagne, the founder of the Holy Roman Empire. Charles was a weak and ineffective ruler, who faced constant rebellions and invasions from his enemies. He also suffered from a mysterious condition that caused him to fall into a death-like state for several hours or days at a time. This condition was called lethargy by the chroniclers, and it may have been a form of epilepsy, narcolepsy, or cataplexy. Charles's episodes of lethargy were so frequent and severe that he was sometimes mistaken for dead, and his servants had to check his pulse and breath to make sure he was still alive. One of his most famous episodes occurred in 877, when he was on his way to Italy to be crowned as the Holy Roman Emperor. He stopped at a monastery in Briosne, where he fell into a coma and was presumed dead. His body was prepared for burial, and his clothes and jewels were distributed among the monks. However, Charles suddenly woke up and asked for something to eat. He then continued his journey to Italy, where he was crowned as the emperor. He died a few months later, after another episode of lethargy. We hope you enjoyed learning about some of the most mysterious and strange diseases suffered by royals. Which one do you think was the worst? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more weird and wonderful videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.